Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the seminar/webinar. So welcome to everyone here in the room. I've got people in the office here for the meetup, and otherwise it is also, as you can see, on a webinar, and it's going to be recorded as well because there are people who couldn't attend and they'd like to get the recording. So I'm just letting you know that it is recorded. All right, so let's kick off. Thank you very much for coming. I think the purpose for me sharing what I'm sharing tonight is just to help people get a little bit of a clearer understanding of what's going on with property investing, especially for 2019. There's been enormous amount of hype in the media and lots of doom and gloom. So I'll be going through that, and then I'll also take you a bit through who we are, what we do, and so forth. So let me just kick off here. I'll just put a disclaimer up just to kick off, just to say that I am sharing just general information here, but you should really rely on your own inquiries to determine whether this information is right for you or not. So just a legal disclaimer there. Okay, here's some of the news headlines, and I've just got different dates here. So this is going back to 2016 already. It started. You know, home sales are on the rise in just one of Sydney's 700 odd suburbs as market looks set to fall into a slump. This is 2016, middle of the year. This is when the rumbles began. Here's another one. Sydney regions where sellers lost the most money. Here's another one. Real estate prices drop at fastest rate since global financial crisis. And then that article just said this one paragraph, amongst others. Plummeting home prices in Sydney and Melbourne have dragged the Australian housing market into its biggest slump since the start of the GFC. So that's really a lot of doom there. Here's another one. We're now into December. Just like a month and a half ago, 1 million Aussies could become prisoners in their own home as falling prices put them in negative equity. This is like quite serious headlines. It caused a lot of scare. People were really afraid of property. This is also December. House price crash by 50%. RBA launches 300 billion bank rescue. You know, this is a forecast. It doesn't say it's happening. It said it's a forecast. It may happen, and then this will be the bailout. So the way the headline reads, it's actually scarier than what's really and truly happening. And then this is today, or just this week actually. Australia's top 10 property danger zones in 2019. So the listed suburbs, mainly they were talking about the retailers. They were Sydney suburbs and Melbourne suburbs. In Brisbane, it was the Brisbane CBD and Fortitude Valley with the two out of the Queensland area. And then I just thought I'd share this with you. I'm going to just click on this link and hope it all works. It's only a 3-minute video. It's a news clip. And there might be an advert first. This is the way it runs. But let's just watch this together. And let me check the volume is up on the computer. And I hope you can all hear in the room. Otherwise, I'll put it onto that speaker if I need to.
Experiencing the world helps build their resilience. Aptamil Toddler nutritionally supports their immune system, so you can let them experience the world. Now in trial sachets. Aptamil Toddler, raise them ready.
Prices are set to take a beating, with analysts forecasting a dramatic drop in property values right across the country. And Nine's finance editor Ross Greenwood joins us now. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Lara.
We've obviously seen losses now in Sydney and Melbourne, but what's your prediction? Are we going to see more drops?
I think it's inevitable, isn't it, really? I mean, common sense tells you, remember the Perth prices have been falling now for the best part of 5 years. Darwin prices, the same as well. So, what you've actually had in both Melbourne and Sydney is overpricing, significant overpricing. And so we know that housing became unaffordable for many people. So these are forecasts that are coming out of Morgan Stanley at the moment. They say Sydney over the next 12 months down another 3.3%. Now, do bear in mind that from peak to trough right now, Sydney prices are down more than 7%. In Melbourne, they're down more than 5%. So it's a situation already that you've had big falls. Melbourne, do note, is going to accelerate in terms of those falls, almost catching up with the Sydney falls. But even Perth continues to fall. Brisbane and Adelaide prices, they're pretty much the only ones that are hanging in there. But do bear in mind there's a fundamental problem here, and that is because the banks, post the Royal Commission, are now more wary about lending money. And also there have been restrictions put upon them lending money to investors and others. You know, if you go out there and try and buy a house right now, they're very tight on the valuations. So there's lots of people who have gone and bought apartments that are now going up and still got cranes on them, where the bank is saying to them, okay, you bought this for $900,000, but we actually think it's only now worth $820,000. You come up with the other $80,000. And so people have got a decision they've got to make. They've already put a 10% deposit down. Do they drop that 10% deposit and walk away, or do they go through with the transaction and try and come up with the money? This also is driving down the property values for many of the apartments that are going to be completed over the next 12 months. And of course, many foreign buyers, particularly Chinese buyers, they've been restricted in bringing cash to Australia. They potentially could also walk away from many of those apartments.
There's an irony in what you're saying here, though, Ross, isn't there? Because this is really the first time in a while, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, that there's an opportunity for first-home buyers with property prices cooling. But as you say, the banks are cracking down on lending.
But even think about this. If, let's say, for example, you're going to a typical apartment, Melbourne or Sydney. In Melbourne, say $600,000. So $600,000, the bank wants you to have a 20% deposit. That's $120,000 after tax in savings you've got to have. And even then, you've got mortgage insurance on the top. Then you've got to get the valuation right. Then you've got to get the bank to lend to you. So it's not as easy necessarily for those first home buyers, although I think with the help of parents, more first home buyers are coming to the market. There will be opportunities out there. There is no shadow of a doubt for bargain hunters. The question is, try to put your feet into the quicksand now and trying to find a solid base. To be confident of buying, that's a problem for most investors, I would suggest. And I would suggest probably they've got another 6 to 12 months to go before you really start to see the bottom of this property market. But inevitably, with population rising, with wages going up, all these types of things, eventually those bargains will be there. And some people who are right with the money at the right time will get a bargain.
Any particular areas?
Oh, look, there's no doubt the ones that fall fastest are going to be the ones that ultimately will be the best. Anything that's close to the CBDs, any of those rings around there. Right now, we're even hearing of some of the areas outside of our major capital cities where prices might have fallen 20 or 25%. These are big, big falls for people to withstand. You just hope it doesn't have a big knock-on impact on the overall economy.
Absolutely, and start saving now, I dare say. Ross Greenwood, thank you.
Interesting. It's quite sounding a bit, concerning from the way it's tightened up. Let me just try and get back to the screen.
Prices are set to take a beating with...
Okay. Right. Okay, so we're back. Right, okay. Just a few comments before I carry on about what was said there. The one is they're becoming tighter on valuations, absolutely. Valuations are all over the place. They can be anything from right on the money to 50,000 under, some 90,000 under. You just never know. And myself being in the property business, we have a valuation on a particular property. It comes in low. Sometimes the broker challenges the valuation, and then the next one comes in on the money, or it comes in 50,000 under, and the very same property gets another value work or something happens, and then it also comes in. So it can be on the money, 50,000 on the very same property. You just never know. So valuations are done by independent valuers. So that is a consideration. And it's always really been like that, to be honest. Valuations have never quite been, they are not market value. They are lender's value, and they will be anywhere, and no one ever knows. They're unpredictable. But right now, with the banks getting tighter, this is just, unfortunately, what happens is the valuations come in low, and it helps the banks because they don't have to lend that much money. They get more cash in as a deposit. Sometimes it's misleading because you're thinking at a 10% deposit and a 90% loan, but once the valuation happens, you got to put 20% in at the end of the day. Okay, so let's just carry on watching these headlines here. Oops. Okay. So let's have a look now in Queensland, because when I talk to people in Sydney or Melbourne, it's just doom and gloom. But in Queensland, look at these headlines. They're pretty different. Brisbane to become the best performing capital city housing market in 5 years. There's another one. Brisbane's property market leading the nation. Defying the downturn seen elsewhere. See the best performing suburbs. All for property indicators for the first time in a decade, okay? Australia's residential vacancy rate is tightest it has been in years in Brisbane. It is now harder to find a home to rent in Brisbane than Sydney, though nowhere near as shocking as what poor Hobart, people from Hobart are facing. I don't know how you pronounce that. What do you call Hobartians?
Maybe Hobartians.
It sounds like a Martians.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like outer space. And then look what it says here. Most capital city markets are feeling the effects of the softening of the Sydney and Melbourne property markets, both of which have come off an unprecedented property boom. Brisbane bucks this downward trend as it continues to thrive in the changing landscape through a strong local economy. The Queensland capital vacancy rates in the most recent quarter sits at 2.1%. That's really a tight vacancy rate. Vacancy rates on average is about 3. What that really means is it's harder to find a property to rent in Brisbane than it is in Sydney or Melbourne. If you're a landlord as an investor, you have an easier time finding a tenant like that there than what you do here. Some clients, when you first talk to them about Brisbane, they say, oh, I'll never get a tenant. I say, do you know what's really going on? Because this is it. Look how tight the rental market is in Brisbane for both houses and units, well below Sydney's rates at the moment, well below. According to The Economist, overall, it has a strong local economy with a lifestyle and affordability. Affordability is the key word. Brisbane's affordability is fantastic. So sometimes we have clients who come to us as investors, and when they see the affordability and they go down and look at the property, they've actually moved down. I've personally had 3 of my clients in the last year. Supposed to be living and working in Sydney, change their minds and move down there. Brisbane will continue to be at the top of the pack in terms of growth prospects. So just sharing that. So let's get into what we do and how we do it and share some interesting property research with you to help understand what's happening. So 2020 Property Advisory, I'm an independent consultant for 2020 Property. This is Mike Anderson. He's the owner and director or the licensee of 2020 Property. He's been in this industry for about 22 years now. Fantastic experience, and he's a wonderful guy. He's started off in finance, then he was into financial planning, and then in financial planning he kept telling clients, you know, get investment property. He was so passionate about property, he thought, I just love property too much, I think I'll just get into property. And he was really interested in property research, so he always used that to guide himself and to guide his clients. So he ended up, you know, moving into the property research business, helping to advise clients. And he's been in the game now for over 20 years. He's done developments in his life and mostly sales. We don't do developments at all now. We just do sales, and we do residential. So Mike has done industrial, but we're only focusing on residential now. So really what 2020 Property Advisory is, it's a research-based property advisory business. We do property research, and we use that to look for the best places to invest, and then we share that research with our clients. So just to let you know, we're not a huge, enormous organization that does big seminars of 200-300 people or even 20 or 30 people. We're small, we're boutique. Every client that we have is a long-term relationship for us. We don't advertise a dollar. Every bit of business we get is through referrals or repeat business. So there's Mike, who's the owner. Then myself and Pearlie, we're both in sales. Pearlie also runs the office admin and paperwork flow there. We've got Brad down in Brisbane on the ground, and then there's just someone, Helen and Olo, who do marketing and finance. So really a small, tight little team. So what I'm going to cover off today is just a little bit about us. I won't talk too much about us, but just you understand what we do and how we do it, because there's so many people selling investment property out there. I just want to tell you what's different about 2020. Why are we not like different to anyone else screaming the same thing about investing in property. So I'll show you our business model. Then I'll take you through some interesting research which will really help clarify the property market for you and what's growing, what's not growing, which is hot, what's not hot. Show you some actual opportunities of where we're putting clients and what kind of performance we expect, and then show you what previous performance we've got. So in terms of our business model, as I said, we do property research. So the first thing we do at the top there is we look at the imbalance in supply and demand of properties on a national level. So you all know when there's high supply and no demand, property prices come down. And in the reverse, when there's no supply and very high demand, property prices go up. So we're looking for this mismatch. national level, then we go to state level, then we go down to a local city, and then within the local city, there is so much going on there. You then need to work out which suburbs are right with their supply and demand equation. So we get right down to that. Then we look at the local demographics, and that's really, really important because local demographics is also related to the population growth. We're looking for specific infrastructure changes that are going to increase employment. So the word is employment. If anyone's talking about property and they're not talking to you about the reason for employment growth in that area that's going to drive people into the area, I would say, I don't know what kind of investment that is. Is it going to be any good? Will it ever grow? Might grow in 20 years' time. I don't know when it will grow. But if you can see proper evidence of infrastructure changes, we look at council plans 5 to 7 years out, plus research from many sources, looking for these infrastructure changes, and then whatever jobs are created there, whatever's going on there, we want to know what the demographic is. Is it old senior couples retired, or is it young families with one small kid, or bustling families with older kids? Do they want a 2-bedroom townhouse, or do they want a 4-bedroom house? What are they looking for? Because the demographic guides us as to what actual dwelling these people are looking for. Then we look at the options. As I said, townhouse, house, what are they looking for? Now it says exit at the bottom. So what that means is we are exit strategy focused. Entry focus means you want to know what you're getting into. Am I getting into a house, townhouse, an apartment? We are exit focused. So we ask ourselves, who's going to buy this property off me for a profit in the next 3 to 5 years? And if you can answer that question, you mitigate an enormous amount of risk because you know who you're selling to. So you buying what they want, maybe 5 years earlier, you're going to rent to these people, and in 5 years' time sell to probably a first home buyer when that area is taken off and you've got the growth and you've got the boom going. So in terms of what we do with our clients, if you look on the 1, 2 o'clock quadrant there, the first thing we do is we meet them and we want to understand their goals, their objective. Why do you want to buy, a property? People say, I want to buy an investment property to make money. Okay, great. So you'll make money. Let's say you make 100,000 in 5 years. Why do you want to make that money? What do you want it for? We need to know what your objective is. Is it to pay down the mortgage on your own home? Is it to put money into your retirement savings? Is it for private school fees? We need to know the objective. We'll obviously define capacity, see what you can afford, do some education like tonight. Then you'll come back in a second meeting and present an option in line with your objective and your finances, whatever your capacity is, right? If you like it and you like the options we present, we'd then say, right, get on a plane. I'll pick you up at the moment it's Brisbane and Sunshine Coast we're focusing on. I'll pick you up at the airport in the hire car and I'll take you for 3 hours or whatever it is on a tour that I can show you the physical, visible evidence of why this area is going to grow. What's changing now, in the future, 2 years' time, 5 years' time? Where are the schools? Where are the supermarkets? Where are the shopping centers? Where are the hospitals? Where are the old age care? Everything, train lines, public transport, whatever it may be. So you can see. If you like that and then you go ahead, then we support you. It says implement plan and support. We don't do any of these things, but we've been in the business for 20 years. So we are aligned with people who provide good service, and will help you with things like your handover, your depreciation schedule, your managing agent. We organize that all on your behalf at no charge. If you need insurance, if you don't have a mortgage broker. So we'll help you with any of those steps to make it seamless. So generally our investors are busy and they're time poor, but they've got money to invest, or they want to grow their wealth, but they don't have time to manage an investment property too much. So that's what we do. We help them with that. And then the most important thing is the last quadrant, number 4 there. It says review, plan in line with goals. We want to see you every year, every 18 months. We want to get together again and see you so that we can see how your property is doing. Are you moving towards the goal and objective you said? Maybe if you've held it for a year, I'll say, great, the property's gone up by 40,000 since you bought it. Hold it, it's still doing well. Next year, the same thing and same thing. Then maybe one time we come to you and we say, maybe it's 4 years later, okay, like we did in 2015 in Sydney. We've now reached what we believe is the peak of the market. So 2015, hear my number, we said we reached the top of the Sydney market. We told our Sydney clients, investors, like myself, I had 2 properties. We said sell in the Sydney market. we're going to Brisbane. So we got out of here early when the market was so hot. Open home, 20 to 30 people. Everyone's competing to get that property, pushing prices up. Excellent selling values. We were at the top of the market. We got into Brisbane really early, end of 2015, 2016. Properties hadn't started to move yet. They were really, really low. So that's our strategy. We get out at the top and get in at the bottom. And as I say, we want to stay in contact with you, long-term relationships, and we want to be accountable. We make the suggestion on what to do. We want to be accountable and walk that journey with you. We're not going to ever sell someone a property and say, hi, have a nice day. Cheers, I'm out of here. Never see you again. So that's one thing that also we prize ourselves on, our long-term relationships. And I can honestly say, Mike, long before I met him, 20 years ago, the clients he started with then are still his clients today. One of the ladies is 83. She started with Mike, I think in her late 60s or something. Her husband passed away, left a little bit of inheritance, and she said, I don't know what to do with the money. He helped her. She was happy with the first one. She came back and said, right, sell that one, take the money, let's buy two. We're going here now. And this happened. She's rolled like maybe into, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 different markets over the time. And a little portfolio is now worth like 3 million. So for an 83-year-old, it's not bad. She's done really well. So it's nice to have clients who we've been with for a long time. Okay, so we know the property market grows at approximately 8% a year. That's what they say. But it does not grow in a straight line. It's got these short, sharp upswings in growth, followed by a long period of stagnation. So if you think about the Sydney market, it grew between 2000 and 2003. Crazy. Then the Sydney market, for those of you who can remember, it was flat for 10 years. It never moved until 2012-13. So someone buys a property in Sydney and they say, like maybe they bought it in 2009. They say, oh, in 2015, what a great investment. It was a great investment from 2012 to 15, but the thing did nothing for maybe 9 years. If they bought it like in 2004 to 2009 or 10, it didn't actually move. So what we know is when one market's cooling off, like now, Sydney market's cooling off, everyone knows that. I've showed you in the doom and gloom headlines. Melbourne's the same. When one is cooling off, another one is taking off. And when that one starts to cool, whenever it is, maybe 4 or 5 years later, another one is going to take off. So the point is, if you can understand what's happening based on research, where the markets are moving, you can do very well with property investing. Now, this is just theory. I'm now going to show you what it looks like in practice. This is actually let me see if my mouse goes on the screen. No, you can't see on the screen. Okay, this is actually a client in the red line. One of our clients bought a property back in 2001. It was around the $250,000 price point in Sydney. As I said, from 2000 to 2003, the Sydney market shot off. So it did all that growth. In 2003, we were saying to clients, we've reached the peak of the Sydney market. We recommend you sell. Let's go to Perth. So one client, he says, I'm a long-term hold strategy. He said, I'm staying. I'm not selling. Okay, fine. You can do whatever you want. It's your property. Other clients sold and got into the Perth market. As you can see, the green is slightly lower than the red. It's slightly lower for these reasons. We paid capital gains tax. We paid agent's commission, stamp duty on the new one, legal fees. And the prices were slightly cheaper. So it started at a lower price point. But all those entry and exit fees, you make up with the fast growth in the new place, in Perth, for example, within 6 to 10 months. And then it continues taking off for a few years to come. So you can see the growth continues. Then after a few years, we said to the clients in Perth, sell your properties, we reach the peak of the market, let's go to Darwin, and so forth. So I've just taken a 10-year period here. And the difference between the buy and hold person in red and the buy and sell person who then landed up in the blue line there, the difference between them after 10 years is $350,000 more profit. So that's on one property. If you did that over 10 years, you could probably make one and the profits of it become two and so forth. So that's quite significant in a 10-year period. So when I first met Mike, I was a buy and hold person, and I used to argue about, I'll never sell property. I was always taught you never sell, you hold them forever. And he said, Jeanine, I'm telling you, you make more money when you buy and sell. There's only so much the bank will borrow you, will lend to you, so you can only borrow so much. If your capacity is taken up in a stagnant market, it's not effective. You can hold it, but it's not growing. You can release it, pay your entry and exit costs, but go into a growing market, make that money back quite quickly, and then it'll take off again. So it took me a while to argue with him, and one day I sat down and did it with pen and paper on numbers, and I was convinced. So I followed the same strategy myself. I sold my Bardia, Ingleburn Gardens, southwest of Sydney property, Edmondson Park, the suburbs also called, in 2016, about October. Put the money into Brisbane. But I'll tell you what, the exact same house was a 4-bedroom house that was sold at the peak when we were telling clients to sell in 2015, actually made 5,000 more than me like a year earlier. So timing is really, look, luckily property moves slowly. There's nothing suddenly that happens. But if you do time it right, you really can do very well. So I did really well. I mean, I only made 5,000 less, but the property market was crazy. So you'll see the figures at the end on what kind of returns people got. So when it comes to the research that we do, we don't charge our clients for the research. We do the research and we help our clients invest. We get paid by the developer, like estate agents. We're just licensed estate agents, really. So we're looking for growth. Capital growth is our main objective. We want to make big chunks of income every 4 to 5 years. Yes, of course, we want cash flow and income. But cash flow and income is not our main objective. So some people say, oh, I'm buying this property. It's got fantastic cash flow. I said, well, how much is fantastic cash flow? I said, oh, well, I'll be up about, I don't know, give me any number, $10,000 a year. That's pretty good. We'd say, why are you buying that property if it's in the wrong area? If it's in the right area, fine. But if it's in the wrong area, why would you buy that property and make $10,000 a year when you can buy it in the right area and make $40,000 or $50,000 a year or whatever it may be in the right growth market? So we're looking for big chunks of cash. The income part is just a buffer. It's like a nice to have. They're all cash flow positive after tax, but we're not going for income. This is our strategy. Other people have their strategy. So we want to be most effective with our resources and grow the client's wealth in chunks over a 3 to 5 year period. So what we look at when it comes to the research are things that influence growth. And the one thing is definitely supply. So we're looking at the current supply and the future supply. The next thing we look at is population growth. This is massive. Population growth is one of the most important indicators of whether your property is going to grow or not, if the area is going to go up or down. So let's have a look here. If you look at the red line at the bottom, I'm going to get up from the screen. People can just watch this. Over here, you can see it's a mirror image of the purple line on the top. The purple line on the top is actually Queensland. So as I said, property prices grew between 2000 and 2003 in Sydney. So the New South Wales red line meant that people were leaving New South Wales because it became more and more expensive to live, just like it is now in the 2000-2003. Then what happened was the Brisbane market, the people went there to Queensland. You can see in the purple, it's a mirror image. They left New South Wales, they went to Brisbane. After a couple of years, from 2003 to 2006, the Brisbane market took off and people started to, because of people moving there, the property prices started to go up. So if you jump forward 10 years about, you know that from 2012, 13 to 2015, 16, the Sydney market took off again. The same thing happened. It's happening again. People leaving. So about 20,000 people a year moving out of New South Wales. And where are they going? You can see the purple line again is going up. They're going into Queensland, Brisbane specifically, now also Sunshine Coast, because of affordability. So looking at the trend, we can now anticipate that the next 4 or 5 years ahead, the same thing's going to happen. The Brisbane market is going to take off, and that's the next property market that's going to fly. This is a fantastic chart. This is a long-term trend here from 2002 all the way to just about now, 2016. If you look back there, in 2003, there's a little arrow there. In 2003, that's when the Sydney market had reached its peak and the prices had risen, and there was this gap to the prices of Brisbane, the median house price. That gap was Brisbane properties were 40% of what Sydney prices were. Then again, they took off and they started to grow in Queensland. There's a pinch point in the middle. and then look at it now. There's this massive gap. I can tell you right now, Brisbane prices are about 40% of Sydney prices. So we know what's going to happen. That gap's going to close and the Brisbane prices are going to rise because of affordability and interstate migration. So it's always to do with where the people are moving, driving the property prices. The next thing we look at are rental returns. Let's talk about rental returns. If you had $1 million property in Sydney, what do you think your weekly rent is? $700. Good. Okay. If you had a $700,000 property in Sydney, what do you think your rent would be? $450. You're spot on, 100%. So when that happens, you know you've reached the peak of the market. The property prices have risen, but rentals haven't moved in alignment. When you've got that gap, like you just said, this is the peak of the market. This is the time that the prices are going to stop going up. You just know. It's just an indicator that's always been predicted as a trend. So when you look at this chart of rental yields, now for those of you who may not know what the word yield means, it's the annual rent as a percentage of the property's value. So it's like 5% or 4% or 6% round about there. It's just which one gives you a better rent versus the property's price. That's what it means. So if you look at this here, right at the bottom is Sydney and Melbourne. Worst rental yields. Exactly what John said. Got $1 million property, you're getting $750 here in Sydney. So, huh?
It's good value at the moment to be a renter.
To be a renter, not an investor, 100%. I agree. If you look right at the very top, the best rental yields is Brisbane. I'll tell you right now, in Brisbane, if you've got a $400,000 property, you're getting $400 a week. If you've got a $700,000 property, you're getting $700 a week. What a pleasure to be an investor. Now, when it comes to Brisbane, I have to just say, don't listen to the overall Brisbane media and the Brisbane growth as a one number. You've got to know within every city have got sub-markets. So if you look at this is about rental vacancy rates. Look at inner Brisbane. They've got high vacancy rates, more than the 3% balanced market. It's higher. That's the blue line. That's because there's an oversupply of apartments in Brisbane CBD. There's just too many and not enough people renting them. So many of them have converted into furnished apartments or serviced apartments. But if you look at the red line and the green line, specifically the green line, that's you get middle and outer. Outer Brisbane has got such a tight rental market. It's 1.5% vacancy rate. That's nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's so low. It means when a tenant is gone, you've already got 5 people queuing for that property. I'm just letting you know that because there are statistics about Brisbane often put out there. It includes the units, the apartments, and the apartment sector is not healthy. I'll say this out loud. There's not a healthy apartment sector in any capital city. It doesn't matter if it's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, Darwin, you name it. Forget about apartments and don't buy one. I'm just suggesting you're not going to do well. But in the outer ring, townhouses and houses, that's the number. That's what's happening there. Also, there aren't that many apartments in Brisbane's outer ring anyway. 2.1 is the average, and look, the green one's at 1.5. So just to show you that Brisbane as a general thing, it's moved from the 3% when this chart was done to November 18, it went down to 2.1. So it's getting even stronger as a rental market there for investors. Okay, affordability. This is the big reason people leave. So let me ask you before I show that. Any guesses? What's the average house price in Sydney?
So the average, not the median.
The median.
Median? Probably, maybe 100,000.
And what do you think?
1.3.
1.3. What do you think, Daisy? 750? It's 1.1. Now, have a guess what it is in Brisbane, the median house price.
We were mentioning 40% before. I have no idea what the equipment of, but like 500?
Yep, right on.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so it's 540. So there's Sydney, 1.12. It might have changed slightly, but that's really where it is. It was 1.2 or more. It's around about 1.1, I'd say. Brisbane, 540. Now, what's important is the household income in the middle column is almost the same. It's like 8% stronger, only 8%. But you're talking about double the price in Sydney. The income levels of the households are the same, but the cost of the property is double in Sydney. You need double the amount. So you need 10 times your annual income to buy a house in Sydney. It costs you 10 times. It only costs you 5.4 times in Brisbane. This is a huge burden on the household budget. There's no doubt. You go and live in Brisbane and it's a pleasure. You buy a 4-bedroom house for $550,000, whereas here you could never even, in some areas, can't even get land for that. So affordability is a massive driver for people now. It started already a year or two ago, and that's going to continue. All states have a migration now into Queensland, specifically into Brisbane. And I don't know if you know about the Sunshine Coast, the Sunshine Coast University Hospital. Have you heard of it? Can I put this aircon on for a bit?
Sure.
If you wanted to go on, just say so. So it's the largest hospital in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's a university hospital. It's like a little district. There are roads, and it's like a suburb. It's just all medical. It's only 50%. It's 50% occupational capacity or functionality at the moment, this hospital. And they already employed 3,000 new people. When it finishes up in about a year or two, they get everything going fully. It'll employ about 6,000 people, and they reckon with all jobs around to service that hospital, like cleaning and plants and whatever companies do, there'll be about 16,000 jobs, they say. So we don't really know. The point is, that's a massive employment driver in the Sunshine Coast. And as you know, it's a big tourist destination. It's also become a technical and data hub, with companies moving their data businesses there as well, and big insurance call centers and things like that. So affordability is a big driver. Okay, it just shows you that the Brisbane median house prices already moved up since this chart was done, maybe like in a year or so. It's moved to 673. I just pulled it out in November. Okay, demographics is the next one. This is really important. The blue line, this is for Brisbane. The blue line is the past decade, the last decade, and yellow is the next decade. You can see standing head and shoulders above the rest. The next decade, the biggest group of people are going to be downsizers. People today do not want an acre of lawn to mow. They really don't want the maintenance. They want to downsize and have a simple, easy come, easy go. They want to live opposite a park, for example, or just up the road from a park. Go to a train station, just have a simple lock up and go type place. So we're finding people moving from Sydney. For some, even a 4-bedroom house is downsizing. I know it sounds crazy, but for some Sydney-siders, that's a downsize. For others, it's a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. But dwellings are really getting smaller, and I can tell you the demand for, hear me, 1 and 2 bedders in certain places, like Sunshine Coast, the demand is very, very high. They're either retired single people or retired couple who just want a 1-bedroom simple place, or they're working in the hospital, doctors, nurses, and they're from overseas. There aren't enough medical people in Australia for all the jobs at the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, so they're just getting people as fast as they can from overseas. These doctors come out for a 3-year contract. They don't want a whole big house. They just want a 1-bedroom apartment, 1-bedroom townhouse, in and out, a little bit of garden, park across the road, comfortable, easy. So these 1-bed and 2-bed dwellings in certain places are really becoming more and more in demand. The demographics are changing in that regard. Otherwise, 3 beds and 4 beds are still the average. So Brisbane is our preferred market, as you can see from that bit of research that I shared. It's the most affordable of the capital cities. Definitely got the strongest rental yields and the lowest vacancy rates. So very great with tenancy. The changing infrastructure leads to employment growth. So every area that we have properties so we don't own any properties. We don't build them. We don't buy them. We source them. We first use the research to say, okay, this is a good pocket near the airport. Airport's doubling in size. Port next to it is growing. There's a new university going up there. I'm talking about like Tagum, for example. There's a new train line going to Petrie Station. We've got all these infrastructure changes. We said, right, that's a good place to go. Then Mike, he's in Brisbane twice a week, every single week since 2015, and he's seeing developers and trying to find a couple of items of stock for every place that we think is good. So he looks for the right developers, right quality developers, and so forth. And we provide those to our clients. So the suburbs that we do have, if a client's interested, we provide research on that suburb, which is all about the infrastructure change. So I might just share on the examples I have a fraction of the infrastructure, but you can write it down. I'll give you the suburb names and you can Google it. There's very specific reasons that we choose certain suburbs. It's not just, it's in Brisbane, it'll do well. There's no such thing. We're not just in Brisbane because it'll do well. We're in very specific areas of Brisbane. Our results, we want to outperform the average. Even when I show you at the end, our Sydney properties we put clients into from 2009 to 2015, you could say they're weird names. They all outperform the average, because you could say, anybody who made money in Sydney in the last 5 years. Yes, it's true, you all did, no matter what you had. But the suburbs we chose will outperform the average. So we look for very specific infrastructure changes in the research. Demographics point towards infill townhouses. Do you know what that means? Infill? So infill just means the whole area is built up. There's no land. It's like saying Leichhardt. There's no land in Leichhardt, okay? But let's just say there were big blocks there. Maybe Turramurra is a better example. There's no land left, but there's some big blocks of old houses. So a developer, or let's say this person owned it in their family for decades. The person finally passes away. A developer comes along and buys this massive block, flattens that and puts up, 20 townhouses. That's an infill development. It means this is a built-up area. It's highly sought after. It's close enough to the CBD to be half an hour to get into your job or main amenities. Or all the amenities around it, public transport, you've got a shop up the road, garage around the corner. But there are no new townhouses at all in that area. That's an infill development, and it stands out. The minute it's finished, it's attractive because everything's old. You know what I mean? It's like one of those suburbs. That's really what we're kind of looking at. And also well-located houses. So why we say infill is because if you're on the edge where there's land forever, it's called urban sprawl. You can just keep growing and keep building and keep building. That's when there's supply, keeps going with supply. You want to have a constraint on supply and a high demand. That pushes prices up. Our property values are actually less than that. It's about 300 to 550. We've got some 1 and 2 bedders now as well, so we've got 300 to 550. So what we're looking at, if you take a ring of about 25 to 35 kilometers around Brisbane, this is what we're looking at. We're avoiding the CBD. As I said, there's an oversupply of apartments. Even the rental yields of houses very close to the CBD, I'm talking 5 kilometers or 6 kilometers, the rental yields are not strong purely because of the flow-on effect of the oversupply of apartments. So we're leaving that out. We also don't want to go too far southwest. Why? There's not enough jobs. Ipswich, there's so much talk about properties in Ipswich. Ipswich doesn't have a strong enough employment growth like coming into the future that we can see at least. Why would you buy in Ipswich? There's better areas with better infrastructure changes driving positive growth. We can see it, so we're not going there. We're also not going too far south or southeast. Just, again, no jobs, not the right area. So what we do look at is up there in the northern part, anything from Tagum. You can see Tagum just below that star where it says A3. We put clients into Tagum. Right here is Brendale. I have a property in Brendale next to Albany Creek. So this whole area here, all the way up to about here, this is Mango Hill, North Lakes. So that's the one area that we're in. The other one is there down south on the bay. It says Cleveland there. It's actually the Thornlands area. Wonderful lifestyle near the water. It's just about lifestyle families. It's typical 3 and 4 bedders. And then southwest, massive opportunities for growth there. There's Springfield. Springfield, I don't know if you've heard the name Springfield, but it's a master plan development, the biggest one in Australia outside of Canberra. So if you want to Google that, just Google Greater Springfield, greaterspringfield.com.au, and you'll see it's like a new city. They've built a new city, basically. It's phenomenal. It's like driving around in Australia to a new town and everything's brand new. The shopping centre is awesome. It's beautifully designed. And for you, John, who's into design, you would walk through there and say, wow, this outside, indoor section of this huge shopping centre with eateries and restaurants, and it's really stunning. Water fountains and all kinds of things.
So what was there before? Was that just,
There's nothing.
Or bush or?
Just bush.
Yeah.
Nothing. So you actually feel like you're in the bush when you go to Springfield, and then you got this city, and it's just grown. There's a whole suburb called Medical City. The suburb next door to that in the centre is called Education City. So Medical City's got a new Mater private hospital. It's got a whole 8-floor building full of specialists and medical practitioners, whatever they are, who do, I don't know, like radiology and x-rays, all of that going on. Then there's also, in Education City, there's a new university of Southern Queensland there. There's a TAFE, a whole lot of new schools. So Education City's got its own growth there with that new university.
That's area to the southeast. What's the name town? It's like Alabama or something like that? Or?
This one?
Yes.
So we do go through Capella Bar to get there. Cleveland is the newer part. Capella Bar is older, so you're quite right. And Thornlands is new. Used to be, I think, just, I don't know, agricultural maybe or something, just big lots. Now becoming more residential.
What's the other one next to Mango?
So Mango Hill, we've got quite a few areas that we look at, but Mango Hill is also right next to North Lakes. North Lakes is a master plan development, just like, so we've got two master plan developments. Springfield down here, Springfield on the map. There's Springfield Lakes. You can see it there written. Heathwood is another suburb that we're in, it's close by. At the top here, it's Mango Hill, which is North Lakes. We're also in Strathpine, Tagum, so all around here. We've also done Redcliffe, but those are house and land packages, and they're very, very rare, so we have a waiting list, and those are more expensive. They're about 600,000 to 750,000 houses, but we do, I mean, if someone's interested and that's what's right for them, we put them on the waiting list and get that, because they don't really sell to investors, they only sell to homeowners, so we get like 1 or 2 every 6 weeks. Okay, so let's look at some property options that we're doing at the moment. We've got different entry options. We've got traditional house and land packages. So everything we do is new. The reason we do everything new, I don't know if you know about the depreciation laws that changed. So basically, if you buy new, you can depreciate the building and you can depreciate all the fixtures and fittings. That's the lights, the blinds, the taps, the dishwasher, the air conditioners. You can depreciate that. If you buy an existing property, I don't know if you know, you cannot depreciate any fixtures and fittings at all unless the invoices are in your name. So the difference on an average property of 400,000, it means you're losing out on $3,000 a year back in tax over 5 years. You're talking about 15,000. Why would you do that when you can maximize your taxable deductions? You know, you should maximize. So we just want to be most effective with our clients' money. So we only do new, and also everything's under builder's warranty. It's safe, right? We do terrace house and land packages as well. I'll show you some. We do townhouses off the plan. We are not doing any apartments at all. If it's a house and land, the price is approximately 500,000. We generally have 4-bedroom houses with 2 living areas. Most of our developments that we source, we want 2 living areas. Not everyone does that, but we find they're easier to rent and they're easier to sell. The rent is approximately $480 to $520 a week, just depending. And this is an average cash flow positive after tax of $80 a week. We've based that on income of $80,000 and buying with equity. Now, it'll change if your situation is different, and you'd have equity if you owned a property in Sydney and you had it in the last 5 years, you've got equity there, which is the best use of your resources, is to use equity. So here's Greater Springfield. there's tons of information here. But really this master plan development is, they've spent $13 billion so far, and they're spending another $85 billion. So it's already, you know, thriving, and it's got like 20, 30 years, and it's staged, it's slowly going. Stockland's released it in stages, so there's never going to be an oversupply or anything like that. It's fantastic, fantastic growth, and the reason for the fantastic growth is jobs, jobs, jobs. It's a job growth hub. And if you did want to live there, and maybe one spouse had a job in Brisbane, it's half an hour on the highway with no traffic lights. You can go from Springfield to the airport without one traffic light. The infrastructure in Brisbane is fantastic. This is what, this is next door to Springfield. We have got properties in Springfield. Then this is just next to Springfield. It's called Red Bank Plains. Look at this 4-bedroom house, 2 living areas, $429. Now, the reason we've chosen these is if you bought a house and land inside Springfield, it's about 100,000 more. It's about 520. So we're just saying, get in here. There's a new road. It's going to be finished in March, like in a month's time. When that road opens, to get from Red Bank Plains to Springfield Central is 5 minutes. It's actually quicker than going from Springfield Lakes to Springfield Central. So when that road opens, the prices of these suburbs are going to go up. And I mean, it's very attractive. You're getting everything in terms of growth from Springfield, except the property prices are subdued because it used to take a whole long 20 minutes to get to Springfield, the old road. But when they make the new road, it's going to be 5 minutes and you'll be there. This is typically what they look like inside. They're tiled, they've got air conditioners, they're completely finished, they don't have to add anything. Here's a different house and land package. This is in the Sunshine Coast. It's a little bit more expensive. They're a dual key. So there's a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, one on top of the other. So it's a dual key. These are renting for $840 to $1,020 a week, and the price is $700 to $750 depending on which one. So that's really a very good rental return. Here's terraced houses. We've got them about $450,000 for a 4-bedroom. Rent is about $420 a week and $60 positive cash flow after tax. This is what they look like. This is Mango Hill, North Lakes. Everything there's, the trend is terraced housing. Some people thought initially, they said, oh, I don't like terraced housing. I said, well, maybe you don't, but there it's definitely the trend and it's the way to go. And you can go suburb for suburb. And these are almost finished. There's about 100 lots left. When they're gone, as I said, it's built up and there's nothing left. There's a constraint with the water on the one side and can't build there and there's nothing left. So when those go, the prices are going to really start moving up because the supply is going to dry up in the next year. This is what they look like. Also nice finishes. All our properties, all have got stone bench tops, stainless steel appliances, air conditioners. And I say that because many Queensland properties don't have air conditioners, believe it or not. Here's just another view of them. Just to say they're 4-bedroom and 2 living areas. So it's quite interesting. There's a garden in between. Can you see the house? And you go outside the dining area to the terrace. There's your garden, and then your garage is there. This is the terrace housing. It's quite different. The garden in the middle to the typical house and land, which is the garden around the side or whatever. Then we have townhouses, anything from $300 to $455, depending, 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom. Rents on it's dollar for dollar. We have rental dollar for dollar on these properties, approximately $50 a week positive cash flow. So here's an example in Kellamvale. I don't know if you know, it's quite a Chinese area, and it's the up-and-coming like yuppies. They're the young guys who would like to live in a big $1 million house, but those are like the Chinese parents, and the kids are renting in Kellamvale, and they'll eventually buy it at around the $450,000 mark. Very nice townhouses.
When you say they're cash flow positive, what sort of deposit? You see the previous one for them. What sort of deposit would you be looking at, or what sort of equity would you to achieve that? At which price point? So let's just say at 400. Yeah. At 400, we would say just have 20% in cash. You may get the 10% loan, and then you'll pay some LMI, or you put 14 or 15% in less LMI.
but I'd have 20% just because the valuations, we just tell clients up front, be prepared, your valuation can come in 20,000 under or 50,000 under. It's not the market value, it's just what's going on with the banking thing and the tight vals. But 100,000 or 90 is enough for a 400.
So I'd say about 1/4 equity would give you positive cash flow.
No, you get positive cash flow at 10%. Even 10% deposit with LMI. Yes, you'd be cash flow positive after tax. Absolutely, yes. And the reason for that is the depreciation is huge. Depreciation on a $400,000 townhouse is 15,000 on deductions alone, just depreciation. So if you had a second-hand property, you wouldn't get half of that. 15. It's 8 for the dwelling and about 7.5 for the fixtures and fittings. Now you wouldn't get that 7.5 at all if you bought a second-hand property. Tagum, I'm just putting this on there just to show there's like 1 to 11 there. It's just saying that there's schools and hospitals and shopping centres and public transport, primary schools, kindy, everything very close, and about 14 or 15 kilometres from the CBD. So we had some there. This is what they look like. 3 and 4 bedroom townhouses. This is exactly what they look like inside. These fixtures and fittings are real. So not all, some of them have displays, but these are that wood finish, very nice. And you can see they've got just better design. I mean, to have elevated cupboards, it's just a better builder because, you know, you mop the floor or wet the floor or put water on the floor. If your cupboards touch the floor, they start to warp. It's just, you know, that someone has thought a bit better. Even the shape of the toilet. It's not just a standard toilet. It's got a little bit of a nice design on the toilet. Nice big rectangular grey tiles. So very nice finishes. This is Sunshine Coast. So this is Ascent. Now this is 5 minutes from the University Hospital and 5 minutes to the beach. At the most, 10 minutes to the beach, 5 minutes to the University Hospital. We're specifically targeting those people working at the hospital or retirees, singles or couples. 1 and 2 bedders in this suburb. This is Meriden Plains. In this suburb is next to Caloundra. If you want to write Caloundra down, it's quite close to Caloundra. So Meriden Plains. In this suburb, everything is 4-bedroom housing with a little tiny pocket of 3-bedroom townhouses. There are no 1-bedders and there are no 2-bedders. So we chose this. Why? Because do you know how many single people want to rent from 300 to 380 or 390? They can't find a thing. Everything's 450, 550. So you put this there, you got something to rent for 320, let's say, or 350. The demand's going to way outstrip supply. There just aren't enough. So we chose these. They are very nice and they've got a New York loft style with these long, see those long wooden beams on the outside? It's just a bit of finish, and inside they double volume ceilings with a kind of airflow. Back in Redbank Plains, there are townhouses. We also do houses there. I showed you before. We also do townhouses, and these are 350,000 plus minus for 3-bed, but again with 2 living areas. It's not common to have a 3-bedroom townhouse with a living room upstairs and a living room downstairs. Also, the price, you can see the price is very affordable at around $348 for 3 beds. We had clients in Springfield. They were 4-bedders, but they were $420,000. So from an affordability and rent, good to rent to tenants and good to sell in 3 or 5 years' time at that price point, that size. So also, again, when the new road opens, 5 minutes to Springfield. There's just a couple of things we've got. We've got more. I'll just put an example of every type of dwelling. Do you have any questions on that? No? Okay, just quickly show you some of the performance of what we've done in the Sydney run, because obviously Brisbane hasn't finished growing. We're still, getting in early there. But we went to a suburb like Bonnyrigg. So someone would say, like, why are you going to Bonnyrigg? And people told Mike, you mad? What are you doing in Bonnyrigg? It's like council housing. And he said, I've done the research. They're going to flatten 80,000 council houses, and there's gentrification coming, and it's true. In 2010, we put clients in there for $395, sold in 2015 for $650. The client made $255,000, and it was $112 a week positive cash flow after tax. The ponds, another area, we went in 2009, cost about $510. 5 years later or 6 years later, sold at 900, made 390,000 capital gain and $91 positive cash flow. Rudy Hill, again, people said, what are you going to Rudy Hill for? What's going on there? So remember the M4 crossing the M7 highway was being built, it wasn't finished then. And Mike said, the minute that highway interchange finishes, watch the growth of the suburb, because businesses, logistics hubs, warehouses were all moving there to get their trucks on the road, to get out. What is that? It's employment again. Everything comes back to employment growth. Whoops. So put clients into these apartments for 360. In this example, as two young guys with dreams. These two young guys came to Mike, they were 22, and they said, we want to buy an investment property. Each one couldn't afford it. So he said, why don't you guys buy together? You're 22, you just want an investment property to make some extra coin. So they said, yes. So they put their money together. They never had enough deposit. They lent 30,000 from the one guy's dad. So they got in. They sold, it was in May 2011. They sold 4 years later for 530. They made a profit of 170. Now they owed the dad the 30,000, which they lent for the deposit, gave it back to him. They came out with 140,000. They split it. They made 70,000 each. One guy did a very, I don't know if it's a clever or not clever investment with his money, but he bought an engagement ring for 20,000 for his girlfriend, and I don't know what he did with the rest. And the other guy, no, then he bought a property actually from us in Tagum, and the other one with his 70,000 got himself into a coffee shop, and that's what his objective was when he met Mike. So just a nice story there of sometimes people forget that if you don't have the money, pair up with someone and say it's a purely an investment. We'll wait till we're told to sell, and then we'll sell and take the profit and go again. Edmondson Park, this is where I had one that I spoke about earlier that I sold. Went in there in Feb 2014 for 530, 4-bedroom houses. Look at this client. This is not me. This is another client. He just waited for the capital gains tax 50%, exemption. It takes 12 months to lapse. He waited for that 12 months to lapse. So it's Feb 14 to March 15. That's 13 months later. He made 185,000 in 13 months. So he was waiting to go overseas. Very good result for this guy.
Where is Edmondson Park? Is that Brisbane way?
No. This is us when we were putting clients into Sydney in 2014. So I bought one here. Edmondson Park is, Bardia?
No, Bardia.
Or Ingleburn Gardens.
Oh, down Campton way.
That way, yes.
Oh, okay.
I sold mine and I made 180,000, but I sold mine in October 16. Just in time, I must tell you, because you would get less than that today. Plumpton, another area. People said, why going to Plumpton? Townhouses for 399,000 in June 11. 4 years later, sold for 590. Client made 191,000. Just incidentally, this particular client who bought in Plumpton, he also bought, a client of ours also bought in the Ponds. And remember, the Ponds made 390,000. So he made about $600,000 profit in 6 years from 2 properties, right time, and he got in. He has also a client, so self-managed super funds. I don't know what anyone is listening or on the webinar or here. If you have about 200, 250 in your self-managed super fund, you can buy a property in your super fund. I have to say it's the cleverest thing you can possibly do. Why? You take your super fund balance from 200 to 600. Just like that, by putting a $400,000 property in there. So now you've got leverage. You're growing a $600,000 balance. The property is going to grow way faster than the super balance. Super grows like 2.5% to 3% a year. Property is growing 10, 11%, whatever it is a year. And when you sell it, you pay a flat 10% capital gains tax. What a benefit. And if you sell it in retirement, no capital gains tax. So this client came to Mike 3 years away from retirement. He says, I can't afford to retire. He had about 150, 180,000 in his super fund. Mike put him into, at that stage, we had NRAS properties. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a National Residential Affordability Scheme that don't exist now. But that gave you 10,000 tax-free a year from the government because you're putting affordable housing out. So he gave him an NRAS property in his super fund. 2 years later, the client sold it in his super fund. He made 151,000 profit. So this guy in 2 years added 150,000 to super fund. You could never do that with saving. So to put a property in your super fund has got to be the smartest thing to do. It is a little bit of a long process because you've got to get a SMSF set up, paperwork forever. But if you've got the staying power just to know you're going to go through a lot of paperwork, you sign all these things, set up a trust and all these kind of structures. An accountant can do that. And then you put the property in there. Once you've done it and you've made the deal, you can relax and it'll do well. And when you sell it, as I say, the capital gains tax is so low. This is a fantastic tax saving. Okay, so that's me. I'm in summary. What you really want to do is establish the objectives first. What is the objective and why would you want to buy property? Then we're going to utilize research and we're going to understand what's the exit point with our properties. Then we use the property proactively just as a tool. It's just a tool to achieve financial objectives. We're not in love with the property. We're not emotionally engaged with the property. We're not attached to the property. We're just saying it's a tool for these financial objectives. Because some people struggle. They own a property and they don't want to ever sell it. They think of it like their own home. You need to think of it as an investment, just a vehicle. We actively manage our clients' portfolios. What we mean by that is we tell you, stay with the property, stay with the property. And when we think it's time to sell, we think it's time to sell. This is the time to sell in the market. Don't wait. You don't have to sell. It's your property. You can keep it as long as you like. But what we're saying is we actively manage portfolios and we would keep you up to date with what's happening. We don't charge our clients any fees. So any meetings we have, if you or anyone you know wants a one-on-one to see what's a possibility for you, it doesn't cost you anything. I urge you to do it. Some people are so terrified of property investing, they don't know which way to turn. It doesn't cost you a cent. Have the meeting with us. Get the information. Get the education. You might not buy that month or that year, but you might be educated enough and start working towards a plan where you save a bit more and you eventually get there. As I said, we don't advertise a dollar. All our business is through repeat business and strong performance for our clients. That's our objective. We want our clients to do well. We buy our own properties. I've just bought one in Sunshine Coast, in Brisbane as well, in Brendale. If you speak to Mike or Pearlie at the office, almost every suburb that we've got, we've bought something in there. So we do the very same thing that we put our clients into. We're not advocating anything that we wouldn't do ourselves. So that's really it from me. In terms of feedback and next steps, those of you who are here in the room, if you wouldn't mind just filling in your feedback forms and just to tell us what we would like to see that you didn't get tonight. If there's anything you'd like to add or you wished you'd seen that you didn't get, tell me. And then tick a box there if you want any of those options. And if you're listening to the webinar or the recording of the webinar and you would like to maybe know what is your borrowing capacity, or you perhaps would like to understand what it takes to buy in a self-managed super fund, or perhaps you just want to know a bit more about what options we have, which property options we are putting clients into, or maybe you have a property or two and you want your portfolio reviewed, or even if you live in your own home and that's the only property you have, talk to us. If you've got equity in your own home and you're not using it, you really, in my opinion, should. It's just effective. The best way to buy an investment property is to use equity. You don't put a dollar down. And just let me add, it doesn't put your own home at risk because the property that you're buying secures the loan against it. And even if anything was at risk, no matter what you bought, it eventually comes to the same thing at the end of the day. But people think, oh, I don't want to put my house at risk. It's not putting your house at risk. You're just taking a deposit there from the equity. It goes as a separate structure, accounting-wise, all attached to the new property that you're buying. That's really it from me. These are my contact details on the screen. If anybody would like to contact me, there it is. And if you'd like to follow up for anything whatsoever, I'm here to help. Let me just check what's going on here. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. I'll stop the recording at this point so we can just chat here in the room. Unless, let me stop the recording.